Dave, I want to do a webinar with you because I wanted, I'm the practical side of raising money in the church, and you're the more spiritual side of it. So let's join forces and, you know, put our brain power together and just have a conversation. So that's how we want to treat today. But I know a lot of you have heard from me in the past, so I'm going to really let Dave do most of the talking. And we thought it would be a great idea to start right off to talk about spirituality. And who better to hear from than Henry Nouwen, right, Dave?
Yeah, Henry Nouwen. We love this guy. This is a great little book, right? Many people have probably seen this book, and what I like about Henry Nouwen is when he talks about money, it's all in terms of relationship, and he was known for his authentic relationships, right? And that's what we all kind of strive for, is these authentic relationships. From what I know about him, he was extremely generous with all of his gifts, but particularly his money. And I think that's what we're going to try to touch on today is our relationship. How do we use our money in a way that brings us closer to God and with each other? That's really the point of today.
And isn't it great that those three things on the little Post-it note, our fundraising is not a response to a crisis, even though we are in one, right? It's a way of announcing a vision, and doesn't it tie nicely in an invitation, like you just said, to other people to join us in our mission. But if we have a problem talking about the mission, right, which we acknowledged yesterday, our why, we're going to have a problem talking about money. And
Yep.
That's what we're faced with.
Absolutely, absolutely. So we'll get right into it, right? So as Jim said, I've been at in St. Louis for the last 8.5 years, and I've had the opportunity to work with 147 of the 178 parishes. And in my experience, and again, my own personal faith journey has been that I believe people are absolutely craving God. They're absolutely craving God, but they're unsure how to start that relationship with Him. And I think a person's attitude towards money directly has a direct influence on the relationship with God. As Jim said, I started my life at Anheuser-Busch for 30 years. So I think for many people, God and money run neck and neck as the top priority. And I think many Catholics are looking for guidance on how to handle their money, not only the daily management and their long-term management, but more importantly, the charitable giving of that. And in St. Louis, quite honestly, I think they're looking at the church. They're looking at the church for guidance. And I'm not sure that we're very good in giving practical, specific things to do. And that's some of the things that we're gonna touch on later. And again, the whole point of this is how do we use our money in a way that brings us closer to God? The quick analogy that we talked about the other day was this. Most people I know, most Catholics that we know, if somebody knocked on your door and they said, hey, we're collecting food for the local food pantry or for the local St. Vincent de Paul, most of us would run immediately to our pantry. We would open up the pantry, we would fill up bags of food and give it to them, right? The generosity would just be unbelievable. Well, how come that isn't like that when it comes to our money? Right? Our money is another, what we try to talk about is our money is like a can of beans. It's like a can of corn that's in your pantry. It's just another one of those things. But for some reason, many people have a more intimate relationship with their money. So we're trying to get people to detach, right? Through this time of pandemic, a lot of us have had a kind of an extended Lent. That's how I'm kind of referring to it. We've had kind of an extended Lent. And we've had a lot of time to think about, well, what is God calling me to do? What is God calling me to do? And one of those things is not only with my talents and with my prayer time, but with my money. So how can we look at a way of detaching? Go right to the next one. Thank you, Joni.
Right. And, you know, it comes, I really feel like, you know, I read the book Rebuilt. And in the book Rebuilt was the first time I think someone was brave enough to say demanding consumers, that people are, you know, we're, like you talk about, we're showing up, but we expect something in return, right? Especially when it comes to our gifts of money.
Yeah.
And I even heard, I don't remember if it was last year or the year before, the plenary speaker at ICSE even talking about how our offertory gifts, too many of us are just tipping Jesus. Those $5 gifts that we're receiving, we wouldn't leave a server a $5 tip. You know, we're
Right.
almost embarrassed to do that. So why are we so tight? Why are we not open and generous in regards to our sacrifice and what we share with the church?
Yeah, exactly. So when I started in this ministry 8 years ago, one of the things that I was told was, Dave, if you talk about time and talent, the money just rolls in, man. You just look out, because the money's just going to roll in. Well, that's absolutely untrue. That's like the biggest falsehood of stewardship. We have to be intentional and disciplined in our talks about the spirituality of giving money. Many parishes are excellent in talking about prayer. They're excellent in talking about ministry participation. But what they do is they fall down when we talk about the spirituality of giving money. In St. Louis, most parishes I go to, the lay leaders will say, Dave, if Father Joe talks about money one more time, I'm going to strangle him, right? Well, in reality, Father Joe and every other pastor and priest in St. Louis rarely talks about money. 99.9% of our priests rarely talk about money. But what parishioners get confused with is they hear all the requests for fundraisers, right? We're going to have the parish auction. We're going to have the parish picnic. The Knights of Columbus are doing this. The Boy Scouts, the Girl Scouts. So they confuse all these fundraising requests with offertory. And as Joni, as you said, Holy Mass, during this time of pandemic, right? We've had a lot of live streaming masses, and we've actually had priests in St. Louis talk about the spirituality of giving money at offertory. And it's beautiful, because if you think about it, I think many people, we've fallen into this rut, and I'm going to call it a rut, of when the offertory, the collection comes by, that this is my financial transaction with God, right? This is
Right.
when I pay off God, as Joni said, tip God, right? This is all wrong. This is absolutely all wrong. Again, we're talking about relationship. The offertory is our time of self-sacrifice. It's our time. We're called to imitate Christ, right? So we're about to celebrate the body and blood of Jesus, the Eucharist, right? This is our time to unite our sacrifice with his sacrifice. This isn't hard. We all know this, but we've got to talk about this. So why is it that when we go to friends' house, right, we go to people's house, our friends or family, we'll bring a bottle of wine, we'll bring food, we chip in for pizza, right? But when we go to Mass, we're invited to the Lord's house. How come we come empty-handed, right? I think many of us come empty-handed to the Lord's house. Well, the offertory is that point where not only can we bring our visible gifts of money to contribute, but we also bring, more importantly, our invisible gifts of joy and friendship and love and fraternity with each other. This is what we're putting in that basket. It's not just a $20 bill, a check, an envelope, the laminated card that says, I give electronically. It's not just the money, it's the gift of our entire self. Again, I'm going to go back to this word relationship that we talked about.
Right. Instead of it, the old paradigm shift was, and I kind of took some slides out, but some people have heard me talk about this, that it was a moral obligation to give, right? And so you give because you're supposed to give to the church, not because we have a relationship to God, not because that we want to help fulfill our mission, which is our why, we do God's work and serve his people and bring people closer to Christ. And I think in the Catholic Church, the reputation that we have, that all we do is talk about money, we earn that reputation. Like you said, Dave, because one, we either said, we're not going to talk about money, so we do all those things where we create fundraising silos, or the only time we talk about money, and I hear this from pastors all the time, I promise my community that I will only get up and talk about money once a year. Only once a year will they hear that money talk. Well, then the problem is they get up and they talk about paying the bills, right? And boy, that doesn't create any real emotion for me to give. I got to take care of my own roof and utilities. Well,
Yep.
If we talked about the mission and talked about the lives that we impact, go back to our why and the work that we do, it's amazing how generous and giving people are. And what churches don't understand is, then they think is, well, then we have too much money, nobody will give anymore. But what they don't know is people will give you even more. They want to see you do more of the work that you do. So we keep getting in our own way.
Yeah, again, this word relationship. So think, just one quick point before we get into the Bible here. The pastoral letter that was written on stewardship was called Stewardship, a Disciple's Response. And I think for many of us as diocesan folks, when we go out and meet with people in our different parts of the country, many of us, we have to be disciples first, right? So if stewardship is our response, that implies that we're disciples first.
Exactly.
And I think that's where many of us have to start, because if I am making invitations for prayer, invitations for ministry, invitations for being generous with your financial support, if I'm not a disciple of Jesus, that's going to sound like I'm begging, right? It's going to sound like I'm pleading for money. So I think for many of us, we might have to move back a little bit further in the chain and work on our discipleship, right? We need to remind people that we are followers of Jesus, and again, we're called to imitate his actions. So I just wanted to make that point.
I agree.
So within, the beauty of the Catholic Church is we've got all the stuff before us. We don't have to reinvent anything. It's all right here. So we always talk about how the Bible is such a great source for financial management. And trust me, I got like a ton of jokes if we had more time, but I'll hold off. But within the Bible, they always talk about the term first fruits. This is absolutely key. Because we forget about this. First fruits simply means I'm going to give my first and my best. Mm-hmm. My first and my best, not what's left over. Because I think many of us give what's left over. This was the old joke I would say at our parish at St. Francis when I was there before we moved. We have a bar restaurant right across the street. If you gave a bigger tip over at Frankie G's for the waiter than you'd put in the offertory on Sunday, you might want to rethink your priorities. Not that you shouldn't give that waiter a tip. I'm not saying that. But I think we probably need to ratchet up in proportion what we're giving back to our parish to support the mission of our parish. So this idea of first fruits is huge. The other thing, go ahead, Joni.
No, well, and I was just thinking, even when we were talking about the priests and they're pulling away from wanting to talk about money, but look who talked about money. How many times in the Bible? It was Jesus, right? He didn't say, I'm only going to talk about money this one time. He talked about money a lot.
Yeah, and we haven't talked about tithing or anything, but tithing was starting at 10%. Jesus upped the ante. He said we're supposed to give it all, right? So leading Jesus, a lot of his parables actually relate to money, and we've listed some of these out. And I think when we're talking about the spirituality of money, these are things that we can refer to, right? Because people know these stories. We'll go right to a couple of them. The talents. We're called to nurture and develop our talents. We're not called to bury them, right? How many of us do the minimum required, right? Many of us do the minimum required to get by. Well, that's not what the parable of the talents is telling us. The parable of the talents is saying we're supposed to nurture and develop and give back with increase, right? Yeah. Of the mustard seed. This is another one. The tiniest little seed becomes the biggest plant that supports life, right? And in God's creation. Well, that's the same thing with us. And I think the key is this goes to the point of no gift is too small or insignificant. Mm-hmm. But more importantly, that seed had to be crushed, right? That seed had to change and transform to grow into this mighty tree. Well, that's what God is calling us to do, right? We have to die of self, right? We have to die of our own self-sufficiency so that we imitate Christ again through gratitude and generosity. And then the last one is the easy one, the widow's mite. This lady gave the 2 coins. This lady gave more proportionately than anybody.
Right.
And this is a big point with our giving. Many of us, again, I think we give the minimum amount required. We just, just to sneak in, we give the minimum amount. And I think this in St. Louis, we talk about being more intentional, disciplined, but more importantly, proportionate. We've all been different gifts, but we are called to give proportion to what God has given us.
I absolutely agree. And, when we talk about that, the tipping, Jesus, and that small amount that we're giving, just to share a really quick story, and Dave, we're going to have to keep moving, watching the time. Yeah. But I saw a commitment card through the offertory program that we facilitate at OSV, and a person who had given $2 increased their gift to $2.50. That's like the most sacrificial gift someone can make, But then we have people that are giving $5 who could be giving $50.
Yeah. We talked the other day. We said that person that went from $2 to $2.50. They talked to their spouse. They prayed over that, right? I mean, they really thought about that.
I agree. Yeah. And then as far as the fundraisers, we call those silos. And I agree with you. If we stayed focused on the mission, the work that we do, and the other problem we're facing is we have to have these disciples that they themselves are generous, but know what we're being generous to is to do God's work. But we are so paralyzed by fear. And I always tell pastors, I look them in the eye and I say, Father, pray about that fear that you have about talking about money, because that's that roadblock that's keeping you from working from abundance. God doesn't want us to work from scarcity. He wants us to work from abundance.
Absolutely. Yeah. So this isn't an original thought, but I was having this same thought at the same time of many people. Many parishes in St. Louis are using fundraisers as a crutch. It's actually in opposition to offertory. If you think about it, one of the main tenets of stewardship is to give without expecting anything in return, Well, fundraisers are the exact opposite. When I give to a fundraiser, I expect to get something. When I pay $150 for my wife and I to go to the parish auction, I expect to get a nice meal. I expect to be able to hobnob with, Pastor Joe. I expect to get discounts on a vacation or ball tickets to the Cardinal games when they beat the Cubs. This is the things that happen. We've got to get off of these fundraisers, and we got to focus the shift back on this offertory, the sacrifice of giving of ourselves.
I agree. And, because of the crisis and the pandemic, and we can't be gathering, we know we're not going to have those fundraisers and festivals. And I just want to comment a little on the practical side, because we as a team were talking recently. We feel churches right now have a false sense of security because many of them got that PPP loan, and so that's helping them, squeak by in this budget. And then they're also saying, this is what they're saying, but they're not like making sense of it. Our online giving has gone up. Okay. But hasn't your offertory gone down? It's not like everything's up. Online giving, the number of givers has gone, it has shifted, but the offertory hasn't gone up. And what they're not seeing is we're going into this new fiscal year in less than 30 days, right? We're almost through June, and there's no plan in place without the $50,000 fundraiser they're going to have. So what are they going to do? They're going to start cutting ministry, and that's the problem, is having that vision. And it's really about focus, about, mindset. One of my coaches tells me one of the best things I could have learned, you can control your actions, your reactions, and your mindset, right? So Dave, you want to talk a little bit about, that positive and that negative mindset to have?
Yeah. So, this is the from as Tim talked yesterday, going from maintenance to mission, right? This is what this whole thing is talking about, and this also goes to the point of scarcity and abundance. This whole slide goes to the word trust, right? We're using the word relationship in our in the way we use our money. In any relationship, in any good, loving relationship, trust is the key, right? Think of all your human relationships, right? Trust is the key. We have to absolutely trust that God Jesus, the Holy Spirit, is going to give us everything that we need. And this then goes into the conversations of wants and needs. For many of us, I think this is an opportunity also to reevaluate kind of the ministries in our parish. This goes back to a lot of us just do the same things the same way because that's the way we all always do it. But I think this time of pandemic, this time of priest abuse within the church, I think this is a time that God's calling for some pruning. I think this is a time that God is calling for some real transformation and change within our church.
Well, and you and I wanted to address the true elephant in the room. So, and I get that this is, every day, every phone call practically is, we shouldn't be asking for money right now. Because of what's happened with the shutdown and the economy. So let's just address it right now.
Yep. Yeah. So I would totally disagree that if somebody says we shouldn't be asking people for money, the way I see it is God is calling us in our current circumstances.
Loud and clear.
God is calling us in our circumstances. Many of us have lost jobs. Many of us are fortunate to still have a job. But God is calling us. He wants us in relationship where we are at right now. We always hear that phrase, meet people where they're at. Mm-hmm. Jesus is trying to meet every one of us right here where we're at. Jesus knows more about suffering than any of us. And he wants us to bring our suffering to him, right? He wants us to rely on him, trust in him, that word trust again, and not on our own self-sufficiency and our own money. He wants to bring our needs to him. And quite honestly, this is also hospitality. This is another tenet of stewardship. Well, we don't know what other people are thinking, right? We don't know what are in people's minds. And just because somebody may be out of a job, that doesn't mean that we automatically assume that they don't want to give. They probably still do. So I think we're doing people an injustice. And actually, we're talking about a lot of social injustice and the lack of respect. I think we're showing people a lot of lack of respect when we don't invite them. Right? It's not up to us to make the call whether or not they can afford to do something. They know whether or not they can. So I think, quite honestly, this becomes an easy way out for parishes not to do it because they're uncomfortable doing it. So this is the easy crutch for me not doing it.
And those people that can't possibly financially contribute and they may be out of a job, they have more time, right? So is there a way that they can get more involved in the life of the parish today? We're all on a stewardship journey, and I swear it's a roller coaster. It's got ups and downs, and we're all on a different part of that roller coaster. So we have to be sensitive to, like you said, I think it's an injustice and disrespectful not to be inviting people to support the mission. And I want to answer the practical side of, the elephant in the room and nobody has any more money with this slide. Many of you see me do it. Giving USA publishes each year, they've been doing it for 50 years, what philanthropic giving is in the United States, okay? And the new report, literally I have it on order, it's coming out this month. I can't wait to see it for 2019. So in 2018, there was $427 billion given to philanthropic causes. 29% of that went to religion. So I wanted to know, okay, that's all denominations. How much of that was Catholic Sunday offertory? Literally no special collections, not Easter and Christmas. How much was Catholic? I found it through CARA, so, we can, it's reputable. About $6 billion. That's 1.5% of all philanthropic giving. So right there.
Yeah, and the beauty of this too is the statistic is Catholics give less than we'll call it 1% of their income. So if 6 billion is only 1%, right? And if we can inspire people to be more generous in proportion to their gifts, this is a low ball. I mean, 2% would be 12 billion. I mean, we're at the bottom of this. We could easily grow this without any real effort.
Yeah, it kind of really just gets me when I hear nobody has any more money to give. But then here we're back to the challenge. So looking at CCS was doing multiple surveys during the pandemic, and they were surveying all nonprofits in the nonprofit sector. The only one not expecting an increase in fundraising is religion. We continue to miss out.
Yeah. So we talked about during this pandemic, usually the month of December, right? That's when a lot of the nonprofits, you see all the commercials on TV. Well, think about, as you've been sitting home watching TV, think about all those same commercials that you're seeing now, right? The nonprofits are very smart how they're crafting their message, because they know that people are sitting there idly wasting time. So this has become another little December push for a lot of nonprofits. We have to be in the game. We have to be in the game. So away for this, and I'm looking at the clock. Okay, I'll be quick. So several years ago, a lot of people in St. Louis, Dave, why I give to the offertory? Why do I have to give to the annual Catholic Appeal? Why do I give to second collections? Why do I give to parish campaigns? People really didn't understand that these are all different buckets of money, right? When you give to one, it doesn't go to all these different buckets. So we made this simple guide called the My Catholic Giving Guide. It's a two-sided page. The first side on the left is kind of the spirituality. It's got some Bible quotes, but then it also quickly defines all the different levels of the different buckets where the money goes if you're in St. Louis. The second side is the worksheet. This is the business side. We have found when we can help people plan their giving on an annual basis, people generally are more generous than they give from their first fruits versus their leftovers. So on here, we ask people to figure out what is your annual giving in a year, what is your percentage of giving, and if that's 1%, let's increase it to 2. Multiply your giving times the percentage. That's going to give you a finite amount of money. Right now, I've got a finite amount of money, and here are the 5 different areas. And now I can allocate money in those different areas all at one time. So literally, here is 95% of the things you're going to be asked to give. You can do this on an annual basis. Sit down with your spouse, go through this, pray to God. God, I'm giving 1% now. I think we're being called to give 2%. Go for it, right? But then you can actually fill out each of these different areas, and we can support them. And here's the thing. We're called to support these. We're called to give offertory to our parish. We're called to give to our annual appeal. We're called to give to second collections. We're called to give to capital campaigns. We're called to give to community things that we're involved with. This is a simple tool that allows us to do this. And the beauty of it is the Pope isn't calling you. Your bishop isn't calling you. Your pastor isn't calling you. You, your spouse, and God are determining what I'm going to do. And then the next year I do it again. This is an annual thing that I go through. Did I get a raise? Did I get a bonus? Did I lose my job? This is a way that we can give proportionately, and we can move people up the scale, because people really, when they start thinking about what they give, this goes back to the earlier comment about the dignity. If a person can only put in $1 now, even though they lost their job, you know what? The gifts that they're going to be receiving back from God, that's going to inspire them to give more later. This happens all the time to people, right? So this is a simple tool. And I think in the chat room, we have a Word document that you can actually use for your diocese to customize to use for your diocese, and feel free to use it.
What I love, Dave, it's nobody's telling a person how much to give, because we've done that in the Catholic Church, and it's terrible. If everybody would just give $3 more or 3% more, we'd meet our budget. And not everybody can do that. And if you're limiting yourself, you ask for $3 more and I could give you $30 more, you're only going to get 3 because that's all you asked for.
Yep.
So no one's telling you what to give. And, I've seen those giving charts, based on your income, and it's usually really high, not 3, 5, and 10%. Which is like you said, nobody's even barely close to that if the average Catholic's giving 1%. So this is that discernment. Prayerfully discern what you can give. Those giving charts, I even had people ask me, what's the magic giving chart to get people to give more? Like, there isn't one. We can, of course, suggest, but if you allow people that time to discern what all they're blessed with, how can we give back? And then, like you said, that's the secret sauce, the giving guide or commitment card, covenant card, invitation card, whatever you want to call it. The act of writing it down every year by renewing my commitment is where you'll see the offertory growth. That's why our Sunday visitors, successful with an increased offertory program. We would not have financial woes in the Catholic Church if we instituted this annual renewal process.
We would, and I think many of us have seen in our diocese where parishes that have this culture of discipleship, stewardship, evangelization, they're actually seeing their giving maintain or even increase, right?
I know.
It's happening everywhere.
I love it. So I'm engaged with some churches, for years that just do this every year. Inevitably, every single one of them during this pandemic, their offertory is up. It's not down. It's because we've already nurtured this relationship, which this is a part of building a disciple. This is a step in that spiritual journey for people. Henry Nouwen even says it in the spirituality of fundraising. The bishops even said it in the disciples' response. The thing they didn't have was the response card. Whatever it is, whatever it looks like, that's why the disciples give us the physical aspect to make that covenant to support God. So, Dave, we got 2 minutes, and I don't want to make Katie mad. We should work really hard on
I don't want to make Katie mad either.
So, really quick, just a couple more things in regards to practicality and looking at the impact. I thought it was amazing when I saw that 25% of people will grow in their contribution based on everything that's happening, and 54% plan on maintaining their giving level. So the money's there. We have got to get rid of our big excuse of nobody has any more to give.
I think when you're quarantined in your house, you realize all the things you can do without, right? So now I have more money to give.
How much do we save every day on Starbucks, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, and another study quickly done during this pandemic I thought was amazing. And this is our time to shine. And I hope parishes are taking advantage of it. And I think too many aren't. But because of the pandemic, we got shaken up, right? So some of us our faith got a little bit more centered. And in this study, 27% of Catholics said that their faith was stronger because of the pandemic. And I hear from pastors all the time who are telling me that they're live streaming their mass and they got 1,500 people on each week, and they're only a 700 household church.
Yeah, this is everywhere where there's more attendance, so-called attendance at live stream masses, right?
Absolutely. Dave, take this one because I think we've covered it, but I think it's just three powerful things that we want to make sure we.
So kind of sum this up. Catholics are absolutely generous with their response, but we just need to be proportional. This is the key. We need to be proportional and intentional in our charitable giving. The second point here is we should always be willing to invite people. Never assume that we know what the other person is thinking. Many people, this is the only way that they can maybe be part of the parish at this point, right, in their lives, before they can spend more time in prayer or ministry participation. Don't assume anybody's capacity to give, because we will absolutely we will be underwhelmed. We will make the wrong guess. And then again, let's not take the decision making out of the hands of the donors. We don't know what their relationship with God is, right? God is calling each of us to do something.
Absolutely. All right, Dave, I did pass over one quick slide, but that's okay. I do want you to just do a little plug, a little commercial here about your newsletter, because it's amazing. I love getting it each month.
Well, thank you. So about 8 years ago, we started the Stewardship Alive Stewardship Monthly e-newsletter. Many people from across the country, around the world, and I'm not bragging, but I'm just saying we get a lot of people, a lot of feedback from people, and it's simply just sharing ideas within the Archdiocese of St. Louis and across the world, and then just a quick link to resources that we have available. So if you'd like to be on it, my email address is there, and we'll send it out to you. And there's tons of corny jokes in there as well. So send us your jokes.
Ones that you didn't get to tell us today.
Yes, exactly.
It's a great newsletter. I really recommend that you tap into it. I love getting it, and it's just so powerful. And you, every time you do bring such a spiritual aspect to it that I can relate to, because you're Joe Schmo parishioner just like I am, right?
Well, I'm Joe Sixpack. I'm Joe Sixpack parishioner. That's exactly what I am.
Oh, David, it's been a joy as always.
Thank you again, Joni.
Thank you. We're going to turn it over to Katie so we can go into our chat rooms and have some conversation.
Thanks so much, Joni. Thanks, guys. That was fantastic. The jokes in that newsletter are the best. I share them every month.
Wow. Thank you.
So we are going to break out into 6 groups. Each group is going to have 2 OSV people. Those are all of us folks in the red shirts. And then a couple of you, your small group leaders, have questions and things to discuss. So if you can unmute, turn your camera on, you'll be there for 30 minutes. You'll come back at around 12:15 Eastern with the opportunity to share what you've discussed. And so you should not have to do anything. It should automatically take you in the room, and then it will automatically bring you back when you're done. So we'll see you all in 30 minutes. And if you have any questions or you need issues, just request help from the host, and I will be there to help you. Katie, I see you're still with us. Are you having trouble joining your room? Great. Joe and Zach, and I think that's Jim, I kept you in the main room. If you'd like to go to a room, just let me know and I can push you in there. But otherwise, we'll just be here quiet for the next 30 minutes.
The first couple points that we talked about, connecting yesterday to today, and how that's being exhibited and what we're seeing. You know, there's a parish in rural Columbus that really just took the first couple weeks of the crisis and did nothing but relationship discussion. There was no mention of offertory collections or anything like that. Did phone calls, and even though they're a little behind on the bishop's appeal, it still had a great impact. And that father, I think that priest has been there for 3 years. He's working them down the path of connecting mission first and letting everything else follow behind. And that was indicative when the crisis hit. They were able to connect mission to that spirituality, and then it fostered and kind of carried over because they've been minimally impacted in their offertory. So that was great. Kind of a consensus on the relationship part. It is helping with the diocesan appeal. They see that. This year's a little different. But then I thought we ended up with, you know, what are some things we can take away, and how are some ways we can support parishes that in the Diocese of Columbus, they had an internal discussion on the bishop's letter on stewardship. And did they have a full understanding enough that they could have a conversation with each other and then taking that out to the parishes? And we thought that's a great framework to say, if you know, sometimes teaching is the best way to learn yourself. And so challenging the leaders, priests, your councils to have that discussion about the letter again, bringing that back to them might be a great way for them to relearn the basics and be able to talk about the basics of stewardship within the framework of the letter. So we thought that was a great idea.
Yeah, and quickly, one thing, somebody did say, I don't remember who it was, and I apologize, changing the title of the stewardship and development person at a parish to stewardship and discipleship. So taking development out of it, and I thought that was a really good thing. That was a great change. Man. Appreciate it a lot. Yep. Now we're going to head on to Joni Lewis and Jana, who had a group.
Yeah. So we had a great conversation with Margaret from the Diocese of Lafayette, Louisiana, Paul from Allentown, Matt from Evansville, and Cindy from Milwaukee. And I think, Margaret, you volunteered to give a quick review of our discussion.
Right. Thank you. Yeah, we had a great discussion. And one of the things that we kind of started off with, I guess our conversation went kind of organically, was really about some of the things that we heard in the presentation that at the same time helped us to channel mission and discipleship comments from yesterday, along with helping to change our mindset about fundraising, you know, sort of combining those two things. And one of them was just the comment about what offertory means, about the sacrificial part of that, and how offertory is joining your sacrifice with the sacrifice that Jesus made on the cross. And then the other part of that too was really about the fact that people's relationship with money is very complicated, and that it must be dealt with in order to free them from their insecurity about it, and maybe the hurts that they have about it, or the fears that they have about it. And I think Matt from Evansville said it well about preaching about money without asking for it, but really trying to free people from their worries about it. And then in terms of the effects on diocesan fundraising efforts and annual appeals, in our group, no annual appeals had been suspended. And in fact, I think in Allentown and then in Lafayette, both of our dioceses are ahead of where we were last year in our annual appeals. So that's encouraging. And then I think in terms of supporting our parishes, we're also, several of us were looking at offertory recovery programs and really trying to be sensitive to the timing of that so that it hits when it's needed. And at the same time, we're not having an annual appeal compete with it. And that may mean moving the annual appeal to a different time of year, but it doesn't mean the annual appeal is suspended. And then lastly, how we can support our parishes to foster stewardship. I think Paul from Allentown made a really good comment when he talked about how this had to be both cultural and it had to be addressed in terms of implementation. And culturally, the mindset is, I work for you. In other words, the diocese works for the parishes. We're here to help the parishes. The parishes come first, and that we are, and an example of how that might look implementation-wise is that many of us spent time building parish giving sites when COVID hit because they didn't have them, and we had to put them up on the fly. And the implementation part of that culture is very hard to live because we want the annual appeal to come first. It's hard to put a parish's needs first over what we have to do in our jobs. And so those are just some of the things that we shared. I want to thank everybody for a great discussion.
Yeah. Great, Margaret. Sound like you guys did have a great discussion. So hopefully we'll keep that going. We're going to hear from Domingo and Monica and their group.
All right. Thanks, Jim. Okay, so we had Jenna from Columbus, Mark from Baker, Todd from Rapid City, and Patrick from Bridgeport. And again, we had a great conversation too. I think we could have went on for another hour easily. But Todd's going to go ahead and talk for us. Thanks.
Thanks, Monica. Yeah, we had a great discussion, primarily centered around with the questions, would center around a common theme of relationship, building both with the parishes and parishioners, giving both pastors and parishioners an opportunity to see that the diocese is truly there to help and not in an overbearing manner, which seems to be a common theme in the Catholic Church. One of the takeaways from Dave's talk that Jenna had shared was in regards to that premise of when we go to a friend's house, we bring something. And what do we bring when we go to our church on Sunday or during the week? From an internal perspective, it starts with us, and that service level that we have experienced for those of us in the business world or the secular world, are we not bringing that to the church in our own parishes? And so starting with us as a focus and each of us going forward, it was a very enlightening conversation with a very talented group of people. Thanks. Thanks,
Todd. Appreciate it a lot. Next, we'll hear from Ray and Sarah.
We had a great group. And I just want to thank the group I had today as well as yesterday. Kind of working remotely and doing all these things. It was just so nice to just have a dialogue with folks. I really want to thank them. We had in our group Scott Bader, Wendy Piper, Judy Holicky, and Sarah. Sarah was taking notes as per Rich's request, and Scott is going to be our spokesperson.
Great, thanks very much. So just touching on a couple of the points there. Number 2, parish stewardship and affecting the diocese. I think the commonality we saw there that pastors that are enthusiastic about stewardship tend to be enthusiastic both on the parish level and the diocesan level, and we see that success. So if how we reinforce that enthusiasm for stewardship is key for both parish and diocesan success. In terms of the relationship questions, just in general, obviously the strength of the relationship, whether it's with the parish, the diocese, by parishioners or parishioners to leadership or to God, that's what matters. It's about relationship. Is where the key to success is in terms of our stewardship, regardless of what level. And then we went to question 5 there, skipped over 4, about what might have changed our mind. Someone mentioned the message of giving proportionately was crucial. We all mentioned, I think, the genuineness and affirmation that we got from today's presenters as well as yesterday's presenters. So very good. And the enthusiasm, especially, I think, kind of a recharge. I don't know what it is about people with the last name Lewis, but their enthusiasm just shines through and almost irrepressible there. So anyhow, great comments and great sharing and great info. Thanks.
Great. Thank you so much, Scott. We're going to head on down to Tampa and talk to my friend Tina Sullivan.
Thanks, Jim. So we had a great group again today. Lisa from Oklahoma City, Pat from Bridgeport, Connecticut, Kimberly from Joliet, and Margaret from Boise. And Sharon Kaiser also is in our group, and she is going to share our notes.
Thank you, everybody. It was great to join the discussion today. The first question, we talked about, the why has to happen with the fundraising, and that the relationship definitely, has to be there. We feel that the pandemic has brought more of this to the surface and even given pastors, the courage to speak more about this in the future. Number 2, we've seen that parishes, have those parishes that have reached out to parishioners, are doing better and have communicated. And I think, we all know that. I think someone was, I don't know if Kimberly had a pastor that went door to door during this to see some of the parishioners. And I think in Bridgeport, we had a pastor that flew over the whole entire diocese and blessed the diocese too. So some of those creative ideas have kind of helped those parishes that have thought to do this during this time. Number 3, as far as incorporated relationship into your fundraising and stewardship efforts, Pat let us know in Bridgeport that they doubled their online giving, and then at this time, at this desperate time, a lot of people, have been willing to give, and there's been a lot of outreach, and doing that has really, focusing on that has really, helped in their diocese. Question number 4, what ways can we support our parishes in implementing practices to foster stewardship? Doing things like, helping them, do things like videos and getting priests, in front of their audience, and also being a resource with some of these digital resources. Someone mentioned they're going to incorporate some of the St. Louis charts, for their parishes and that too. Also, the other thing is doing some education for international education on stewardship with some of the foreign priests, and that also came to light, and how can we educate them more, on stewardship, especially, at this time. Also, the takeaway is, continuing to help parishes, and technology is so important. And, how can we, keep working with our parishes and, helping them use technology in that.
Thanks, Sharon. And finally, our last group of the day is Rich Fisher and Dave Baranowski.
Great, thanks. We had a number of different things to share, and really grateful for our group. I had Renee, Katie, Kristen, and Dave, and Sister Caritas in my group. So thank you again for a great discussion today. And I'll turn it over to my team to give a couple of quick input points.
Okay, making sure I'm off mute first. There we go. Hi, everybody. We covered, thanks, Jim. We covered a lot in a short amount of time, so I'm just going to run through the notes here. The first discussion we brought up was ministries, actually, and ties back to maybe it's time also to have a pivot in some of those ministries at our parishes because of COVID. So one of the things that was mentioned is when you go and you visit your parishes, you ask them the question, when was the last ministry sunset here, and what's the last ministry that you created? So that they can start getting in a different mindset of how to be more responsive, and then make sure that every year they're kind of tying into a ministry reset, even during that season of stewardship that you do or planned offertory in the fall. With the increase in online giving, there were a variety of topics that we covered that all kind of tie back into an understanding of who that donor is, and the response, and just the way that we acknowledge those gifts, and how to help steward those gifts throughout the year. So we talked a lot about especially online gifts that are new, or new people that signed up because of COVID, making sure and checking in with the parishes that they've acknowledged those gifts. I imagine many haven't been acknowledged, or perhaps even talked about yet. So making sure that you're doing some type of acknowledgement process for all of the increases in online giving that you're seeing. And then we also had a conversation of making sure that we are tying in this new idea of kind of online giving, which we're going to continue, I think, to see an increase, and making sure that that's still linked spiritually. That if it starts to get disconnected, you almost have a revenue generating empty pew mindset of there's where my gift goes, and it's just like any other gift I give to a nonprofit. That isn't the intentionality of Christian charity and what we're trying to do. So some suggestions that parishes have tried, and Dave mentioned in St. Louis, is that they started instituting the My Parish prayer cards in the pews for everybody, to again link to, even if you're an online giver, to make sure that during the offertory and preparation of the gifts that you're praying. We talked about envelopes, and I too have name dropped OSV a lot of the times because I said they'll change the front of the envelope for free. Go talk to them, so that your envelope isn't just a picture of the parish, but it's actually, who can I pray for this week? How can I serve this week? How can I give generously this week? That also can inspire the envelopes that you use for children's stewardship envelopes. So we talked about the, what's the one thing in hand all the time that parishioners get? It's their envelope. If you shift to online giving, then maybe the envelope actually becomes a more comprehensive plan to stewardship, a broader understanding of that. And one of the other things we talked about as well is just how we can continue to form our priest. Oftentimes it's the diocesan person that comes out and talks to the parishioners, and maybe in some cases father's there and listening intently, and sometimes not. So how do we continually form our priest? Because it's very important, whether you do prayer cards, change the envelope, connect online giving to the Mass, that Father talks about it. And both Dave and Joni brought that up earlier today, that it's really important for the priest to be able to communicate the spirituality of stewardship to the parishioners, and that the parishioners see that understanding and kind of follow their pastor doing so. I hope I hit everything. I know there's other stuff I didn't, Rich. So.
Sure. Katie, that's awesome. And again, these types of events are so very, very important to what we have going on, because it gives us that opportunity to share with each other. And again, we are so disappointed that we're not together in Huntington, but hopefully next year we will be. But in the interim, I wanted to ask you a quick question, if you could maybe just throw it in the chat or not. Would you be interested in a little bit more? Oh, there it is right there. Would you be interested in future events on this format? And we would be more than happy to put this together. and host it if need be. One thing that I wanted to just share before we move on is that Jill McNally said something, and I think it'd be very, very important for us to share either on OSV Inspire or something like that. What are our thank you events going to look like this year? And have you given any thought to what our thank you events for our donors are going to be? So think about that too, and maybe we can get together on OSV Inspire and have an open conversation about that. So moving forward with our date today, Joni's going to come on for about 10 minutes and talk about the practicality of how OSV is helping parishes, and then we'll go into our bonus session. So Joni, please take it away.
Okay, all right, let's see if I can make this happen. And share and slide. Katie, am I sharing correctly?
Go ahead and start your slideshow. We're just seeing, yep, you're good.
Okay, and I'm not showing the presenter view?
Correct. It's
okay. Thank you. All right, I will try to make this brief. But in our small group, I thought it was such a nice opener. Matt said that their appeal is typically, in Evansville, their appeal is typically a fall appeal, but they want to be so focused on helping the parishes that they are having conversation about moving the appeal to maybe Lent so that parishes can recover offertory. And I was like, wow, okay, good. And how can we help parishes do that? So now I'm putting my sales hat on for you. And we at OSV, as soon as the shutdown happened, and this isn't a joke, Hope isn't canceled. So we wanted to move forward with Hope to help the church. And we knew we would have to help parishes recover offertory. And we that's what we do. We're offertory solutions. And we just knew that there was going to be so much happening that we had to be a part of it, and we wanted to be a part of the solution for parishes. So quite frankly, we have a suite of services now under the OSV's New Hope solutions that literally developed because of the crisis. And what we did was, and hopefully we've been in the fundraising with the churches for the past 15 years. So taking that knowledge that we have and the fundraising, the best practices, the fundamentals, quite frankly, of all fundraising under the context of the church, and knowing what works, we came up with 2 programs, okay? So there's a little difference between the two, so I'm going to quickly talk about what those are. One is called the Offertory Recovery and Stabilization Program, and one is called the 90-Day Capital Infusion. 2 very different things. So the first one is the Offertory Recovery Program. Looks a lot like a standard increased offertory program you may be familiar with from our Sunday Visitor, but a little bit skinny down. We took the best elements of that program, which we knew, and it has to be the 2 weekends that kick off the program, because that's where all the magic happens. Is Father's celebratory homily focused on the mission and the work we do, and the in-pew commitment Sunday. We skinnied it down by there's only one follow-up mailing, and then there is an administration of the thank you. So we took it from where there was multiple follow-ups and then final summary reporting to more of that in-pew ask with a great message of faith, hope, and healing newsletter that goes out, and it is a 4-page newsletter. These designs and messaging look very different than the increased offertory program, quite frankly, because I work with parishes, all of us do at OSV, that have been with us year over year over year. So we knew we had to have some differentiating materials. Beautifully designed, and I hope you feel like it has this feel of an appeal. Like at the diocesan level, we create these beautiful posters, which we have for this, and we take that imagery and we're applying it across the letterhead so that the message continues through all the communication pieces on faith, hope, and healing. Quite frankly, I mean, that's what we're dealing with in so many ways. So the process, again, is taking those best practices and fundamentals of fundraising with the opportunity for people to not only renew their Sunday offertory, but to recover. So the commitment card, which we know that, call it a commitment card, invitation card, covenant card, whatever you want, this is the intentional, discernful, prayerful act of writing it down by, if I can, one, help my parish recover by offering a one-time gift of, and to renew my Sunday offertory commitment to my parish by giving X amount, either weekly, monthly, or annually. So we've had amazing feedback to that addition, and I think it's appropriate. This is, again, where we're not taking the decision-making practice out of the donor. If people have that ability to help us recover as well as renew their gift, we're presenting and inviting them to do so. And then we've also done some enhancements on some of those check boxes. One very most notable is the "I need assistance, please contact me," because we don't know everyone's situation. So there's an opportunity for Father to make that appropriate pastoral response to that person. Somebody needs help, and we're the Catholic Church. We're their spiritual family, so that pastor can reach out. The other thing we did was we took one of the best practices from many appeals, which is the opportunity for prayer intentions. And we took all those giving charts off the back of the card because, quite frankly, they don't work. And we wanted to make sure that we had this opportunity to take prayer from our parishioners. So it works so well with the appeals. I hear it all the time. It's now a part of our commitment card. So that offertory recovery and stabilization program, two things: recover as well as renew. That's the stabilization. The other program that we offer is that we came up with is a little bit more, a little cut and dried. I don't want to say down and dirty, but a little bit more really about capital infusion. We're hearing parishes are down in offertory, not all, but on average anywhere from 40%, 5 to 40%. So those ones that are on that higher end of really, hurting in regards to their offertory are probably going to be needing more of an infusion. So it's 90 days, so shorter term. So it's quite frankly to do that, infuse some capital. Again, a nice focused message package process that we can implement and facilitate for any parish of a promise of hope and healing. And the difference is, instead of this ongoing commitment, is over a 3-month period. The ask is, by presenting parishioners with a response envelope, to make a recovery gift in month 1, month 2, and month 3, or whatever they can do. So it literally is working just like the name implies, to infuse capital into the church. So those two programs are able to be implemented anytime. The offertory recovery and stabilization is more like a true stewardship renewal type thing, because it has those elements that are focused to recommit to the Sunday offertory. This, we're even right now, because before it was, we always stayed away from a blackout period of June, July, and August for the most part, because nobody was in the pews. Well, nobody is in the pews, but nobody's going anywhere anyhow. So the timing is that we actually have June, July, and August in front of us to implement the most appropriate program. The 90-day capital infusion can really help cover some shortfalls that are occurring right now. To even close the gap this fiscal year, it's got a couple weeks. We can make it happen. But if you do have, say, a fall appeal, you may want to help parishes infuse capital now, but then stabilize offertory in January. We can talk to you about the best timing for implementation for these kinds of things. So we just want to take a few moments that we've already packaged it. And one of the slides I omitted, and I'm really mad at myself for doing that, I wanted to let you know that we realize even come this fall, we probably won't be wholly all together in the pews. There's still going to be some kind of restrictions, or some people who shouldn't come because of their health reasons and so forth. Every physical element, like the commitment card or the response envelope, we have an electronic commitment card or response envelope for you as well. So we're still doing, you know, the snail mail, that in-home touch, the pastor's homilies, and, you know, the in-pew commitment process, because they're going to be live streamed. But we know that this pandemic has forced many of us to be a little bit more comfortable with technology. So the electronic aspect, the electronic response is married right alongside every physical element. There's an electronic element. And I mean that as well as from the communication pieces as well. So, Katie, I know I took too much time earlier with Dave, so I wanted to keep that short. Are we opening it up for questions or anything else that I can answer?
Does anybody have any questions about our New Hope Solutions, the 90-day infusion and the recovery program? We are poised and ready to help your parishes. So if you have anybody that's struggling, if you know anybody that, just reach out to us and we'll get the right person in there and get them back on track. So if there are no questions, we certainly appreciate you being here. We are going to have our bonus presenter right now. Hopefully you all have some time to stay. I'm gonna introduce you to Domingo Bentoncourt. He's our senior consultant here at OSB, but more importantly, he's bilingual. He's been at it a long time. There's not much to be said. He's a great guy, and he has a lot of great things to share with you. So, Domingo, please take it away.
Thank you, Jim. I appreciate that. And I just want the slides up. I promise you I won't take more than a few minutes of your time to give you a slight perspective on the subject matter as we're talking about electronic aspect and how important it is right now. You know, as we think about and review these past couple of days, you know, our attention is drawn to, as Tim said, we're living in a changing world. You are working with your parishes and really rallying around answering the question why, as the core of our Catholic identity, serving as Christ missionaries. So the relationships, the engagements that you create in your diocese really aim to embrace and experience what it means to be church. And so it's el encuentro, right? And like we know in Spanish, the encounter. So we're called to respond as missionary disciples. Now, I want to narrow it down to the focus of mission, the focus of we as professionals advancing the mission of our church. So I want to get a slide here. Let's see. Let me know if it's the right one, Katie. Let's see. Screen number 2.
Go ahead and start your slideshow.
Okay. How's that?
We're not seeing the whole screen, but we can see your slides in the PowerPoint, so I think we're okay.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So narrowing this discussion for a bit, I want to share with you some interesting facts about the Hispanic experience, again, as it pertains to this electronic aspect, the aspect of online. And I want to shed a bit of light on the theme of Hispanics that are connected and mobile in the marketplace. This particular set of facts are not necessarily intertwined or connected with a philanthropic aspect of giving, but it does give us a window of a view into the aspect of Hispanics utilizing technology. So as we seek to truly create this culture of encounter and answering the question why, it's also important to see some important information about this segment of our community. So in general, Latinos are not perceived as potential donors. This may be due to a generalization about Latino socioeconomic status or their lack of participation in formal philanthropy. So the question is, how are we meeting our Hispanic community online? El encuentro en la red.
Domingo, sorry, can I interrupt you for a second? Can you, we're not seeing your slides go forward, so can you just end the slideshow and then just scroll through the slides in the PowerPoint?
Okay.
There you go. Thank you. Sorry about that.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Connecting with the Hispanic community is important now more than ever. When we consider connecting with the, can you still see my slides?
No, we can't. You're just seeing your desktop now.
All right. Let me do this. I apologize dearly.
You know what? We'll send them out to everybody. If you want to just talk through it, we'll send them out to everybody afterward.
Okay, very good. So one important fact is that U.S. Hispanic consumers are online and they're mobile. They are considered to be the super consumers, and why is that? Is because this population is expected to increase by 86% in 2050. The economic cloud of the segment is at about 1.5. It was at about 1.5 trillion in 2015, which was an increase of 50% from 2010. So they are online, they are connected. 66% of them pay attention to ads. 79% use search engines on a daily basis, and a good majority of them use a smartphone. So the question is, how do your parishes connect with Hispanics on devices that they are using? A second fact is online sources and ads influence U.S. Hispanic consumer behavior. Hispanics use online sources 54% higher than general online population when they are making decisions in the purchases, when they are making decisions in general. For that I think would include philanthropic endeavors. So they use the internet more than television when gathering information about a purchase. They pay attention to online ads, and 93% take action based on those ads, those communications that are presented. So how are your parishes using relevant content across platforms and devices? And then lastly, cultural relevance drives engagement and influence. So we know that 70% said it's important for website content to be culturally relevant. So when they are relevant, 88% pay attention. And an additional 41% feel more favorable towards the message. So here are 5 things to consider of cultural relevance as you are looking or evaluating or even developing messaging for the Hispanic communities. Think about using relevant topics and features. Incorporate things online that the Hispanics would care about. When we think about cultural sensibilities of foods, traditions, holidays, and family ranked actually the highest in terms of appeal. Visuals. Creative visuals should reflect the Hispanic culture in a tasteful and identifiable way. Users want to see themselves reflected in creativeness that includes things that they care about. Language, well, not as important as culture. Language does matter. For some U.S. Hispanic consumers, the Spanish and bilingual content online are still signals that you want to engage with them. And then entertainment, it's important as well. Relevant music. You know this. The guitar, the mariachi. All those things that we can identify with in the culture make it that much attractive to to tune into certain aspects of message. And then lastly, influencers and testimonials. We as Hispanics want to hear from people like us. So the question is, how are your parishes using relevant content across platforms? And then lastly, and the final fact that I want to share is that in recent years, according to Pew Research, some of the largest gains in internet use have been among Hispanic immigrants and those who are fluent in Spanish. So questions to think about, things to consider: how do your parishes connect with Hispanics on the devices that they are using? How are parishes using relevant Hispanic content across platforms and devices? And how are your parishes using cultural relevance to drive engagement and influence to make decisions in the Hispanic community? So with that, I open it up for discussion on the subject matter.
Hello, hello.
Hello.
Thanks, Domingo. Appreciate it. I'm trying to see who's still here, so we could maybe have a little discussion. Could somebody share that has a high Hispanic population in their diocese, what they've heard that their parishes are using across the board, or maybe some best practices that their parish are doing to engage their Hispanic parishioners during the COVID pandemic? Pat, do you have anything?
I do, but give me just a second, all right? I gotta, just give me 30 seconds and I'll jump back on.
All righty, sir. Domingo, could you stop sharing your screen?
Yeah.
Domingo, thank you very much. We are working with our multicultural office to make sure that we are creating relevant material for our priests for the Catholic Services Appeal. And one of the things that we're looking at also is we usually have a priest's day at the beginning right before the kickoff, but we also want to make sure that we're able to put together a similar program but targeted specifically to the Hispanic community. And so your information today was very, very helpful. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Judy. Pat, do you have something to share?
Yeah, a couple of things. Sorry, there was a giant spider on my desk, so I needed to take care of that. I have one comment and then a question which relates to your topic. One of the things that we did as soon as the pandemic hit is I reached out because I've worked on the national level for so long. I know all of these artists that were not going to get paid for the next several months. So I contracted with a lot of the artists in English and Spanish, and we created sessions, faith formation sessions for our folks for every week from Palm Sunday to Pentecost. And what I found was that the Hispanic community responded more favorably than the English community. And so it led me down this path of this conversation about what are we doing in our Hispanic parishes and what are we doing? And again, it goes back to the conversation yesterday in terms of resources. These are not lenses through which I can see. I am a white Irish boy. I cannot speak Spanish, and these are not lenses through which I can operate. So I've partnered with a lot of the Hispanic parishes to ask the questions about what do you need? And what they're telling me is they need resources, but they need ways to teach and engage moms and dads who speak Spanish in the faith. And I would love it if, and OSV does a pretty good job of this, as do a lot of publishers, but it's not just here's the resource, it's about training the folks in the diocese to make sure we're answering the right questions. Because again, it's not just throwing the stuff at them and say, here you go, here's everything. It's about how do we develop the relationship. And part of it maybe is the cultural competencies that we need to understand, because again, they're not lenses through which I can necessarily see. So how do I become more competent in the diocesan level to A, find the right resources, but B, and more importantly, how do I do some of those relationships, begin to create some of those relationships with the multi-ethnic communities?
Domingo, can you address Pat's question?
Yeah, so I think what I would want to do is point you to a very interesting study that was done by Dr. Hoffman Ospino, and I'm sure you have that. It's the Hispanic Ministry in Catholic Parishes, but in the study itself, it points to signs of vitality in parishes with Hispanic ministry, and he lists the 10 things that parishes are doing to cultivate that vitality in Hispanic ministry. But then he also points to areas that require immediate pastoral attention with parishes with Hispanic ministry as well. So let me just show you that if you haven't subscribed to this study, I invite you to do so. And so I think that there are just a number of things to consider as we think about connecting, as we think about meeting our communities where they are. And so when we think about mission advancement, he lists offertory giving among parishioners at Spanish language masses is significantly lower when compared to the size of Hispanic population in parishes. And then it gives us a brief idea as to the kinds of things that we should be thinking about as we ask questions in terms of connecting, in terms of working with the Spanish community. Does that help?
Sorry, I'm muted. Yeah, it does. I think part, and I do have the reports at the office, of course. Yeah, I think part of what that we need to look at, and maybe this is a broader conversation than just today, but we have to go beyond just putting stuff in Spanish. And I think that is the default. We have the second reading in Spanish, and we call it a bilingual mass. We're not doing enough, I think, to cater to the demographic so that they can see themselves as part of the story, and not. Here's an example, and be interested to see how other folks. I just inherited a whole department, and one of the things I inherited was marriage prep. And there's English marriage prep and there's Spanish marriage prep. And I get that. There's different audiences for some folks. But the Hispanic marriage prep is half the cost of the English marriage prep. The same curriculum, the same costs, but the assumption was made by someone at one point that people who are Hispanic can't pay. And I'm really bothered by that, because it assumes that all the people who are non-Hispanic can pay the full price, and everybody else needs to have scholarships. And so we've changed it so that it's all the same price. We've lowered the price for everything, but it's all the same. And we've just made it, scholarships are available. If you can't pay, but no matter what your ethnicity, if you can't pay, we're going to help you. But I think sometimes there is an assumption that A, we'll just put it in Spanish and it'll be fine, and B, well, it's a poor population. And I'm not altogether sure that either one of those are fair assumptions.
Right, I agree with you. I agree with you 100%. I have done many capital campaigns and stewardship development programs with many parishes, and I focus on working with, those small rural parishes that have a 90% Spanish-speaking community. And what I've experienced in my career is that one message that works for a parish in Denver, it's not going to work for a parish in rural California, where you have 95% Spanish-speaking farm workers. And so us as development professionals, as consultants in fundraising and advancing the mission of the church, have to be ready and able to take these processes, these best practice processes that have been developed that have worked very well, but be willing and able to shift them around a bit so that it's meeting our prospects, it's meeting our people that we want to communicate with, it's meeting them where they are. I'll give you a very, very clear example. And we use suggested gift charts when we're doing our capital campaigns as as best practice, industry standard value. But if you think about, well, as I remember, my first few occasions that I presented this gift chart, you have 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 listed as amounts that would be needed to accomplish a goal. I noticed that in these populations where I was trying to work in, they'd be reluctant to even think about those amounts, even though the idea is to pay those amounts in time, right? 5 years, 6 years, whatever. So what we did, and I think we are probably one of the first organizations to innovate that aspect of presenting a giving chart, is that we actually took that chart and we flipped it around and we illustrated those amounts that are better discerned. You see that $30, you see that $40, you see that $50. That's not to say that they can't do $100, but if we list the amounts per month first before we list the total amount, in 5 years or 3 years, it's much easier for it to be discerned. That was one of my first experiences. So we being able to take some of those functions, some of those tools, and flip them around a bit can have a substantial impact.
Very good. This could be a whole nother topic of conversation. We could do 3 hours on that, and I think that would be something would be advantageous for us to do. But it is after 12 here in Central Time, after 1 in the Eastern Coast. Just want to say thank you again for joining us, and thanks to our presenters, Dave Baranowski, Joni Lewis, Domingo Betancourt. Thanks to everybody who attended. Thank you to the OSV participants, my colleagues and my friends. So we'll see you next time. God bless you. Stay safe, stay Catholic strong, and again, this webinar is ended. How about that?
Thanks so
much. See you, everybody. Bye-bye now.
Thanks, Jim.